I'm Jessica Ann Pressler, and you've tuned into Your Traitor Within, a podcast that exposes the brutal truths of healing, self discovery, and breaking free from relentless patterns of self sabotage. I want to welcome Dr. Debra Kessler to Your Traitor Within. Dr. Kessler is a licensed clinical psychologist and child neurodiversity specialist with more than 20 years of experience helping parents move from confusion and frustration to connection and confidence. With a background that spans pediatric nursing, a master's in pediatrics, and a doctorate in clinical psychology, she brings a holistic lens to family dynamics. And she writes about it on her Substack, What's Going On? Keeping Nature and Nurture in Mind. Today, Dr. Kessler isn't just here as a clinician, she's going to share her Traitor Within story. Welcome to Your Traitor Within. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here too. I'm honored to be joining you today.
So, just so everyone knows, we have a relationship that's professional, but we also met walking our puppies many years
Yep.
ago in
Yeah.
California,
Yeah. Four-legged children.
four-legged children. So I want to really thank you for being here because, as I said, you're bringing your obvious expertise here. So yes, you're going to share your Trader Within story, but you're coming here also as a clinician, and hopefully you and I, we'll be able to apply the Trader Within also to working with families, the parents, the children, and how important it is for us to understand our Trader and how we can prevent giving our Trader Within to our children if we
Yes.
parent in a more healthy way, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's such an important way to start off because what happens is you parent from how you were parented.
Hmm.
And those like what we might call legacy or that history about what is or isn't acceptable behavior. And it tends to define how we allow ourselves to show up and then how we allow our children to show up. S-
No, absolutely. I mean, it's intergenerational trauma. I mean, I will not share my story here right now, but I
Mhm.
certainly have learned, part of the trader is learning through messaging and modeling and trauma, but messaging and modeling and in childhood. And I learned from my mother learned from my grandmother. So
Yeah.
it's up to us to change that for our future generations.
Yeah, and it's so important that you're naming that. I think it's so insidious. We don't recognize it until sometimes you hit a breaking point where you go, why do I keep doing this? Or why do things keep going poorly?
Correct. And you working with the parents and the
Mhm.
children, but the parents, you really have the honor and the ability to stop it if, assuming they listen and it's more than just you saying what to do, but you certainly can really help these parents make a difference.
Yeah, it's a lot of work because a lot of times we're oriented to if my child just understood,
Ah,
if they would just listen to me,
hmm.
right? And the problem is that we're talking as if it is knowledge. And
Hmm.
often the core issue is not a knowledge issue. And
Hmm.
even if it is a knowledge issue, the ability to execute and perform is much deeper. It has much more to do with regulation and your wiring and your profile and the whole vulnerabilities that are underneath that knowledge or that capacity to understand.
So then how do you get parents who come with their Trader Withins that prevent them from the parenting that would help their children? How do you get them? Because there's only a limited amount of time. They're coming to you, fix my children or fix this situation, right? So how do you get them to look within to take care of their stuff so they could be the parent that just the knowledge you telling them is not going to work, as you said, if they don't fix themselves a bit, right?
Well, I think the children are the perfect foil to mirror back. Remember when I was saying initially that unless you hit some place where things aren't working,
Mm-hmm.
and children become that place where whatever strategy that you have adopted for managing, if
Mm-hmm.
it is not attuned because you're not attuned to yourself and you don't know about that level of engagement or connection, that's when the door starts to open. And not only that, is that's when parents are more motivated. because they
Hmm.
love their children and they're trying to do the best for their children.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about what you do then. A parent comes in,
Hmm.
they are very frustrated
Yeah.
because of their child's behavior.
Yeah.
They may not quite get the connection between what's going on in the home or
Yeah.
what's going on with them and how their child is reacting to them. But let you speak a little bit more about what happens. So how do you help that family?
Yeah, so initially I like to try to map out or understand what some of the dynamics are.
Mhm.
And the way that I like to map that out is really beginning to divide the history, or as they're sharing their story with me, into domains so that they can understand that the behavior is really the outcome.
Mhm.
It is not a singular thing. It comes from multiple levels. So as we talk, I'll start to explore things like how's their regulation, how's their diet, how's their sleep, how are their allergies? Do they generally have big, strong reactions, or are they, is their nervous system more regulated? Do they sleep? If we don't have that foundation in place, everything else is going to be more vulnerable. And then go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, do you also ask the parent, what does the child do to trigger you?
Well, once we start getting it mapped out what the child's dynamics are, as the parent is telling me, I'm looking at the lens that they are bringing to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as direct as much as how they're narrating,
Mm-hmm.
right? And by mapping the child, we also begin to map the mismatch with the parents, right? What was their biology? If you're a morning person and your child is a nighttime person, if you're a mellow person and your kid is a very active person, you have a mismatch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just naming that has a way of not making it
A fault.
um, blaming in
Right.
any way, shape, or form. And
Right.
often, as we have these conversations, the parents begin to recognize their parents may not have
Right.
noticed it.
Right.
And so that's the door into opening it up with curiosity, right? Whether it's the regulation side or the sensory side, or you're more of a person who needs it quiet and you have a kid who's bouncing off the wall active, or the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
You're active and your kid doesn't match with that kind of
Mm-hmm.
input all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then really building in some sense of what the emotional life is like and how things are encoded for within the parent or within the child,
Mm-hmm.
right? So just because here's the classic example, just because you're cold does not mean your kid needs to wear a coat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By the same token, you may think they're being rude, but the bottom line is they're irritable,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're hungry. They're coming down with something. They're so frustrated they don't know how to handle it in any other way.
Well, because they're young and don't have the tools that we may hopefully have as a grown-up on how to deal with the way that we're feeling.
Exactly. And then children ultimately need and love and want to connect with their parents and feel safe in their parents' environment. So they will automatically almost shapeshift
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to not rile things up unconsciously. And then you've got this history.
Right. So that is how the traitor within is formed in some
Exactly.
families, right? The child is doing whatever they can to keep to feel safe in the family, whatever it is. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about that with your practice?
So, you know, often that's where things start to get unearthed because if I just have a conversation with people on their logical parenting, what to do, what not to do, what about punishment? What about consequences? What about limits? What about boundaries? What about checklist? We're missing that issue
Hmm.
solidly about what is difficult for you to tolerate and
Hmm.
where does that come from? And how do you begin to look at that and be able to be with it enough to not derail you into reactivity? Now, I
Hmm.
don't quite talk about it exactly like that, but we do have these conversations about um, really what is it that leads you to respond in the way that you're responding because you're seeing that you don't feel good afterwards. It
Hmm.
didn't go the way you wanted it to go. And
So,
there's always the space for validation about, you are a loving, committed parent. That's not really the question here.
mhm. And that's important. It's important, obviously, for their validation, but you also don't
Mm,
want to lose them because you want them to be able to hear
yeah.
and stay there. So, in order to create a better dynamic and a healthier place for their children and for them as well.
Well, I truly believe that they wouldn't be so upset if they weren't really committed to their kid.
Yeah.
So it feels like I can say that with all authenticity.
Hmm.
But they get frustrated, and sometimes the kids are very, very provocative.
Yes. Yes.
So we have to name that too.
Hmm. Yes. And you talked a little bit about the biology too, the way their body feels, the way they're.
Well, there's so much to unpack there that parents didn't get a chance to learn about themselves. For example, the idea about interoception, which is one of the senses that is not part of the standard five we think about. We've got, the standard five plus vestibular, proprioception, and interoception. Well, interoception is listening to the cues of your body inside. And
Hmm.
that's beyond just being hungry or needing to go to the bathroom, but being able to sort of notice that you're beginning to get reactive, that heart rate is going up, your stomach is turning. And for children, it's overwhelming, right?
Sure.
And as adults, once we recognize that's a communication,
Hmm.
there's
Right.
some information there that I haven't quite found a way to connect with
Well,
and understand.
and it's a survival communication. It's your body saying something it may not always be right, but it's trying to protect you.
It's it is right in its effort to try to protect you,
Hmm.
but it may not have strategies effective enough to protect you in a constructive way,
Hmm.
right? Because a child will throw a tantrum,
Right.
right? Which is so
Right.
the behavior is not really
Right.
in line with what's constructive.
So is that where you would come in to try to change, there's an understanding of the trigger, there's an understanding of like what's going on, but let's try to react in a way that's productive.
Yeah, and the key piece is also mapping that nervous system, mapping your child's because we look at behavior, but behavior is what gets reported, but
Hmm.
that's the final step.
Hmm.
That's the last thing.
Hmm. Right.
And being able to backtrack to the earlier things, it isn't just the immediate antecedent, right? It could be hours prior. And I think that's sometimes missed.
So while it's really important to teach that young,
Mm,
because you bring it, as we will talk more, into your adult life,
yes.
if we can teach the tools young, then we hopefully won't be triggered the same. Maybe triggered, but we can handle it better as a grown up. But I'm assuming that children still have difficulty regulating because they're children. So we teach the parents, I'm assuming, how to help with that regulation.
Well, the primary thing is to help the parents have their own awareness of their own interoception,
Yeah.
because we also know co-regulation will step in if the
Yes.
parent is not reactive to the behavior, because the behavior is what got punished by their parents, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is the unwinding of things, is being able to go, I have here's the kind of thing we talk about. If you have the kind of nervous system that when your child yells, you get dysregulated because it fits into some trauma that your parent yelled at you or some partner yelled at you and whatever, being able to unravel that and separate that and know that I really want to hear you. I need to take a minute to calm my own body down,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that models, I don't expect the child to have the abstract capacity to do that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But if a parent is able to grow it within themselves, then they don't impose on the child these behaviors these responses that really don't belong to the child. They belong to history.
Right. So, do you ever recommend that the parents seek therapy, like trauma or somatic therapy, while you're working with the family?
Oh, absolutely. The question is, how far can you unravel things in the
Well,
context
of
of
course.
the parent support?
Mm-hmm.
So it depends. And there are times when I've worked with the parents and not the child to work on their developmental history. So
Okay.
it isn't just working with children. It's sometimes working. I just love this lens for any age group
Yeah, I
because it's
agree.
just respectful.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Uh, and necessary. I mean, without if you only do one piece, it doesn't work. You need to do both,
Right.
and I believe
Yeah.
that with anything with family work and with
Mhm.
individuals. You can work with an individual, even if you work with an individual and then you send them back in the family without taking
Yeah.
care of the family. You do some work, you're teaching them tools.
Yeah.
It's not pointless, but it's much better when it's a family system.
Well, children grow up in the context of their environment, right? We have the biology and how the biology interfaces with the environment, right? But if you can modify the environment to hold and nurture that neurology, right, it's just a much better, I'm going to say bang for your buck, but the efficacy. And I feel like when I work with families, my goal is to teach them and to give them a way of holding their own experience
Mhm.
and then relating to their child. So they're done with me in 6 months to a year because they
Mhm.
got it,
Mhm.
right? Because it's not a particular recipe. It's the process that you recycle over and over again as you hit each developmental stage.
Mhm. Yeah. And do they ever come back like a few years later for the refresher course or a refresher, or have you?
I've had kids come back.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch them, but
Mhm.
sometimes they just do their piece of work and they integrate it, and then I get these
That's great.
amazing emails back about you really were there and I've been able to take off in my
Aw.
life. And it just, yeah, there's nothing more gratifying than getting that kind of um, sense that somebody was able to launch because they got the foundation, the support that they needed.
So tell me a little bit about how you see the trader within fitting into your practice.
Yeah, I think that all of these defensive strategies where we learn to protect ourselves because the context doesn't see us or doesn't know how to relate to us or doesn't help us see ourselves
Mhm.
set up this traitor within because we learn to cut off pieces of ourselves
Mhm.
or hide pieces of ourselves because we have experienced them as unacceptable
Mhm.
or worthy of peer rejection, for example, when you're a grade school student, and the number of parents who have these experiences, right? I think it's almost a rite of passage. But if you don't recognize that you're holding a sense of some, uh, this is not an acceptable part of me,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You don't recognize that you are harboring this traitor.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty universal. And I have to say it's been very interesting sort of transitioning as you know, I put myself in a different environment and I'm connecting with in a different capacity, right? Not as much in the professional realm. And it's so freeing to recognize that, I don't have to hold on to the idea that if I make a mistake, it's going to be terrible,
Interesting.
right?
That is freeing.
It's very freeing.
Mhm.
And so much of, even going through school, when you got your papers back, they had red marks of what was wrong.
Mhm.
Now, I
Mhm.
believe you need feedback. You need corrective feedback.
Mhm.
But if you only get what was wrong, you never learn what was right
Yeah,
and
you're
how
right.
to figure out what was wrong. So I'm not saying let's get rid of really critical guidance,
Mhm.
but I am saying let's get to how to do better and recognize that doesn't define you.
Yes, key.
Yeah.
It's just a part of you. Even back to the trader, even
Mhm.
as an adult, because the trader pops up primarily as adolescent or into your adult life,
Yes.
that doesn't define you either. It's just
Right.
part of you. It's a protective part of you that's not working anymore.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot to being able to say that it came to be because you needed it when you didn't have other resources. And how do we engage with it? This is the work of IFS and
Mhm.
Richard Dick Schwartz, so IFS, internal family systems.
Mhm.
And the idea that you can go back and reconnect with it in a way that takes it out of the sort of the doom and gloom cut
Mhm.
off part that you've rejected to some far reaching corner, that you
Mhm.
can actually bring compassion towards it and
Mhm.
recognize that it's actually really wise
I
of
think it's
that young person.
vital to bring compassion to that part of you because the intentions were always good. I look at the traitor within as the intentions are always good. It's just
Always good.
misguided at that time. What worked as a child because you had to
Yes.
survive, to feel safe, to
Yep.
whatever it was that was going on in your home, whatever trauma may have been happening in your home, you
Mhm.
needed to feel safe, worked then to keep you
Yeah.
feeling safe. I can't say if you were safe or not, but to keep you feeling safe, as you
Hmm.
could be. As an adult, that strategy isn't working anymore.
Yeah.
But it's only a part of you, and it had good intentions. So I always want people to be compassionate, and I can't tell someone how to feel, but I mean, I could see having maybe anger toward it because but I hope
Yeah.
that people could then feel an understanding and compassion toward that part of them,
Yes.
and it's just a part of them, and then be empowered to make changes for the future. It's a learning piece.
It is a learning piece. It's also having just a different relationship, even with the emotions around it, and
Hmm.
how to be present with those emotions. And because sometimes it feels like such a hot stove, you don't want to touch it. And then you have to really recognize it can't hurt you now.
Right. And you have
Yeah.
the ability to take control of it. It's
Exactly. You
not
didn't have
controlling
the
you
freedom.
anymore. Right.
Exactly. You didn't have the judgment. You didn't have the freedom. You didn't have the economic resourcefulness or uh,
And not necessarily the insight. Maybe you didn't realize what was happening. Once you bring it to your attention, then you can work on it.
yes, yes,
So will you
yeah.
share your Trader Within story?
So I would say probably my biggest piece of that was I have some differences in how I learn. And in
Mhm.
the days when I was going to school, um, that was not readily embraced.
Mhm.
And the sense that your capacity to perform in a typical kind of academic setting was really a mark of how good you were, how
Mhm.
smart you were, how accepted you were, etc. And while that was the fact of the time,
Mhm.
it has left a sense that for a long time, there was um, a way I would deeply guard
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And so, and I think probably doing so much academic work is probably part of me proving to myself that I was able to be
Mhm.
competent and capable in spite of a
Mhm.
learning difference approach.
Mhm.
So I think that's also why I have so much compassion for these kids
Yeah.
who just move through the world in a different way.
Mhm.
And in fact, when we look at some of our greatest leaders, really the inspirational people, many of them were inspirational because they saw things differently and were able to
Oh,
bring
absolutely.
gifts forward.
Yes. No, absolutely.
I think it was said that the people who go to Harvard who make A's are not the people who become future millionaires. It's the people who make B's.
Hmm.
It's this idea that it isn't always about just being book smart. It's also about what it's been to struggle, what it's been to grow.
Hmm.
So it's that double-edged sword,
Hmm.
right?
That makes sense.
Hmm.
So then how did you cope with that as a child and how did you bring it into your adult life that may have self-sabotaged?
Um, I think what it leads to is ways to not be vulnerable like that,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
And so it creates a lot of wanting to find other ways to obscure it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So, now I'm pretty good about saying, you know what, I listen to all my books.
Hmm.
It's so fantastic that I listen to all my books,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And it's opened up so much more opportunity. Reading um, academic stuff's no problem.
Hmm.
But to start to enjoy narrative literature,
Mm-hmm.
right, has come with being able to have access,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Mm-hmm.
to books on audio.
Mm-hmm.
So there are those kinds of things that, because it isn't always that you outgrow or you change. Sometimes you find different adaptations,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which as an adult you have the privilege to do.
Um, did it ever affect your relationships to the world, your relationships with other people as an adult, your protective part ever do anything to sabotage any other places in your life?
Well, I went to graduate school for the doctorate after I went through all the nursing things. So I didn't know that I could do that, right? It was really a challenge I set out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's interesting because I'm glad that they have stopped things like GREs for all programs or SATs for all programs because it was weeding out people who were not academically as strong,
Mm-hmm.
but were absolutely good, competent candidates.
Yes, I agree. I'm glad that they have done that. But
Hmm.
some people just are not test takers, and it doesn't mean they're not brilliant by their own way, their own,
Yeah,
but not thinking that very specific way of, yeah, which isn't
very
how
narrow.
our minds think. I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, and then it's also there was a privilege issue because people who could afford to study for the exam with tutors and whatnot were, you know,
Agreed. That
yeah,
was also unfair.
yeah. So it was also tilting the field a bit.
Hmm.
So I would say that that was the bold move to really begin to actualize what I wanted to do or what I could explore
Hmm.
versus when I was younger, that I doubted.
Hmm.
I doubted that I could academically take that on.
Hmm. And how did it feel to push you? Because you have, as you said, I mean, you have a doctorate, you have a master's, you did a nursing pro, you did a lot of academics after
Mhm.
feeling insecure about it or being, or the world wasn't as
Yeah.
then for you. How did you push yourself? Because that's a big deal.
Um, this is part of, I would say, the biology part. And, I think just you just have enough piss and vinegar,
Okay.
right? And I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot to be said for that.
Hmm.
Um, and it's also somewhat of a resource that I'm not going to let others define me,
Okay. Hmm.
right? And you get to a point where you can uh hopefully listen to yourself inside,
Hmm.
right? And question those limitations that have been self-imposed, that were functional, that, navigated times when you were younger.
So you were able to not listen to or not follow those negative thoughts or those negative voices from your childhood that didn't understand. I mean, thank God you're doing what you're doing and others are doing it because
Mhm.
it's, there's a new understanding of how people's brain
Yes,
works. And
yes. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense in that when you design a system that's based on a curve that is, only the middle of that curve,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Anybody who falls outside of that curve, even by this much, right,
Mhm.
is going to have some sense that they are not normal. And I think that's one of the things you start really, um, I don't know, struggling with,
Mhm.
at least for me when I hear it, because normal is a statistic, it's not a
Mhm.
fact.
I don't like it. I don't like that word.
Right.
Because and it sets
Mhm.
a person up for feeling very insecure about themselves. It
Right.
it's just it's divisive and I just don't like it.
And what's terrifying is now we have social media and those kinds of things. So when people don't fit into that, you know, academic way, there are all sorts of off-ramps that can really be derailing and damaging
Hmm.
to sort of find their way to fit in. And I
Hmm.
think it's an important thing for us to really underline in this day and time.
Hmm. For children and adults.
Yeah. Yeah, that we as humans want to fit in. We as humans want to have social
Well, it's survival, right?
acceptance.
Darwinian. I mean,
Absolutely.
to fit in is to survive. When you
Absolutely.
don't feel like you're fitting in, it has to, your body has to feel, you have to fight it because, you know.
Yeah, and just realizing how primal that
Hmm.
is,
Hmm.
right? And really how that can make particularly a child feel so vulnerable, especially when it is happening at home
Right.
and at school where they spend most of their time.
So I'm just going to throw out the Traitor Within again. So you are a
Mhm.
child and you don't feel like you're fitting in and you feel like you have to be a certain person. So you act as best as you can to be that person to feel
Mhm.
safe in your home. Let's just say we're talking about your home and school, wherever, and you have almost a false persona in order to and not
Yes.
be able to be yourself. And then you go through life with this false persona, and you look poorly at who you really are inside, if you are even in touch with that person anymore, because you have this
Yes.
false persona. And then you realize that that person isn't, that the person, it doesn't feel right because, your body knows it, even if you don't know that that's not really you. And then it's sabotaging your relationships in some way because you're not getting close to anyone because now you have this, this
Right.
you know, uh, wall up, and you're not really having relationships, close relationships, and where because you need to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then you discover that this traitor within is, and it's also causing you to not connect to your inner voice, that the good one. You're pushing it down
Mhm.
because it's contradicting who you are. And then finally, you realize something's wrong, it's not working. And then you discover that you're doing this, and you slowly but surely, safely get rid of the traitor that was hiding the true you, and you become vulnerable. And now you can have relationships with
I
people.
love the way that you really frame that um, in that becoming the true you, like
Mhm.
you've always been there.
Yes, you
You've
are.
always been there.
That's right. So I had been on a recovery podcast a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
and but it was, we spoke about the traitor within, and they asked me, because it was a recovery framework. They said, what is
Hmm.
recovery for you?
Hmm.
And because mostly with substance use,
Sure.
being discussed, and I said recover, and I didn't even know the question was going to come out, but my
Mhm.
first response was, recovery for me is being in a place where I can just be me,
Yeah.
you know and it's about the world around me being safe, but
Yeah.
also me allowing, that to just not, just to be me. And I'm not saying I'm a great person, whatever, but it's
Yeah.
just to accept me.
Well, I think one of the challenges is that to be me, to be you, to be anyone is to be human, which means, this goes back to the compassion part, right? You are going to have areas of vulnerability, areas of weakness, areas where you mess up, areas where you're being able to be open enough to accept
Mm-hmm.
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right. And not have the voice telling you, hide yourself, act a
Mhm.
certain way in order to survive your world, act a certain way to survive that relationship.
Mhm.
It's also the acceptance, and maybe this comes with age too, not just getting healthy in regard to the trader and everything else, but also, you don't like me? It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. You know.
Yeah. And I think about how hard it is to sometimes even figure out who you are under all the masks and all of that.
Mhm.
Particularly when there's so many, again, there's so much self-expression now that sometimes the self-expression, particularly in young people who want to fit in, who want to know their tribe, whatever, they try on a lot of different things.
Mhm.
And I do worry about the adolescents in terms of who are they really versus who are they, the waters that they're testing.
And we'll go back to social media again in
Yes,
regard to, where
exactly.
are they trying to get to fit in? What are they trying to create? I mean, as silly as, which is not really silly, but it's, we have the physical filters that are on, and you have a choice of a bazillion filters. You have the emotional filters too,
Yes.
in order to fit in,
Yeah, and the whole identity, right? Um,
which every teenager struggles with, and beyond
that's all
time.
normal.
But you're very vulnerable at that time while you're figuring out who you are. And now you have social media, this person, this, whatever.
Right.
It's in whispering in ears. You have what's going on in school, which we all had when you're trying to figure out where you fit in. And you're right. It's you have and hopefully you have a home that embraces you figuring it out and doesn't tell you how you should act.
Well, and that's the other thing is that in my generation, the idea was, you need to grow up to be an X, Y, or a Z,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
You need to, yeah, perform this way or that way. There weren't options that were respectful of really where your natural talents or interests lied.
Well, right. And there's a lot of culture that we grow up in with restrictions. We have religious culture. We
Mhm.
have where we grow, physically grow up. Even within the United States, every city, it's not even like every
Yeah,
state is
yeah,
different. There's a lot of culture within culture. Then there's a family culture.
yeah,
And again, not back to the traitor within, but this is our subject.
absolutely.
I personally was taught to act a certain way with men, with partners, with romantic partners, because that's only where my traitor within showed up.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because that was our family culture. The family culture was you are to fix it. You are to look the other way when they do anything. It doesn't matter if they cheat on you, it doesn't matter what they do, you are to look
Mhm.
the other way. And you are to carry on no matter what happens. And that was my family culture. That was my mother. That was my grandmother. This is what was taught. This is what was modeled. And people have like, their own family culture that they follow that creates the traitor, because part of it is messaging and modeling. But you can also, I've had people on and they talk about, society, what women are supposed to act.
Yes,
And
it's
that
a big
creates,
issue these days. Huge.
yeah. So that creates, a traitor that, if you're taught young, this is how women are supposed to be. And it's not just, again, it's what you see on TV. It's
Yeah.
what you hear in the news. It's, or religious culture, you're supposed to be a certain way, So there's many places where you could learn messaging and modeling to create the traitor. It's and you're hidden somewhere inside there with,
But I mean, just think back, it wasn't that long ago that the Me Too movement was huge. And
Mhm,
all of these women, right? That norm was so prevalent that once the Me Too movement started, there was an outpouring
yeah,
stories,
yeah,
right?
right.
So it's the other issue, on the society level
Hmm.
around that.
Yeah, we have to do
Very, very.
better. Yeah, we have to do better for our future.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think women, as we have, reached that point, can be incredibly supportive, but in the schoolyard, girls can be incredibly nasty.
Mhm.
And it's very tricky.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. But I see women, I'm always a promoter. I will for women helping women. I always talk about it in the community that I'm in on social media, which is, in regard to narcissism, that's one part of the community and relationships. And then of course just psychology and all that. I eagerly want to support my colleagues. I eagerly, and I know you do too, because you've asked me what you can do. So it's all, I love women helping women. Not that I wouldn't help
Yes.
men too. I don't mean that, but there's a
Right.
wonderful community. And I'm always shocked when you have the divisive women
Yes.
that want to, they're either because of jealousy or and I don't know, whatever it is,
It's
not
their
only,
traitor within that is
yeah,
showing
not
up, that
right.
is running
Not only not
interference.
helping, but hurting other
Yeah.
women. It
Undermining.
shocks me.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate
Hmm.
thing. And I think, just hats off to you and those of us, I guess, generally who are trying to help build more emotional and mental health,
Hmm.
right? And more community and acceptance of vulnerability.
You too, same.
Yeah, it's
But I love, thank you for all that you do, because I love that you start helping in childhood. Because
Yeah.
I've always, I had someone on, a gentleman on
Mm,
maybe a year ago, and
mm,
he he goes into, I don't know if it was, I forgot the name of the organization, but he goes in and helps children
mm,
gain self-esteem, feel good about themselves.
mhm.
And he was going to talk a little bit about the Traitor Within concept with them,
Love it.
which would be appropriate for that age. And I'm like, wow, we could just help people that, start
Yeah,
then, and maybe we can have a healthy group of adults, later, who will
exactly.
then be better parents for their children.
You got to start somewhere in that whole cycle, and hopefully you would touch everybody. Sometimes it's the grandparents, right? Where I've worked with the parents, and it's their parents that are putting such pressure on the system, on their children and on the grandchildren, and how to
Okay.
dance with all of that.
You're right. The big
Yeah.
dance.
It's a big dance. Yeah.
So is there
Yeah.
anything you want to add before we close?
No, other than I really appreciate the fact that we could have this conversation, that
Mhm.
we can be transparent, that we can support each other, that we can think more broadly about acceptance, compassion, um, and really when the traitor shows up, even naming that in a way that's respectful,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because, I think it's our beating up on our own kind of defensive structures that tends to create even more of a negative cycle. So
Hmm.
I think that's really an important piece of work that you're doing with your Traitor Within. So thank you.
And thank you for helping today, and for being vulnerable, and for sharing your knowledge, and for doing what you're doing in your practice.
Thank you.
If you're interested in learning more about your Traitor Within, grab the journal. Visit www.jessicaannpressler.com for more.